the trial and error, the striving and the greatness. Through ups and downs, there is a vision that never changes, the vision to do good. This is Technion. Where does vision come from? From people like you, enlightened minds who fill the future with care, guardians of all we share. Doing good by protecting this precious planet, harnessing energy resources to empower tomorrow, and learning from the scientific genius of nature. Doing good by advancing world health through revolutionary scientific insight, medical treatments, and life-saving technology. Doing good by opening all channels of data, predicting future needs, anticipating the next wave of innovation, and keeping it all safe. Doing good by transferring the power of discovery from laboratory to marketplace, and sharing the culture of creativity across the world. Doing good with the vision to create something from nothing. Releasing the power of inspiration so that everything becomes possible. Doing good with Technion, where great minds come together to create a brighter future for all. Technion, from visionary education to a world of impact.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us wherever you are in the world. I know we've had some amazing a number of people who have signed up to this webinar. So this is part 2 of a series that's being hosted by the Technion with Professor Dedi Meiri. I encourage anyone out there who hasn't seen part 1 to have a look at this. It's available online. It's fascinating. Dedi gives us a little more background about the plant and his work. Now, we thought it would be very interesting to put something together that tries to bridge the work that Professor Meiri is doing at the Technion, and to bridge that with medical work, so practitioners like myself and other doctors across the world who are seeing patients and trying to find more practical ways of using cannabis. So I'm here in just outside London. To give you a little bit of set the scene, really. I'm a GP. My name's Dr Barron. I work closely with some of the medical specialists, if you like, here in England. So I'm part of the Medical Cannabis Clinicians Society, and I also run an organisation called the Primary Care Cannabis Network, which is to educate GPs in cannabis medicine. So this has kindly been put on by Technion UK. It's actually been put on also to raise money for the important COVID-19 project that's being undertaken at Technion. I would like to give a little bit of a background on Technion UK, and then we'll go across to Dedi, and we will hopefully have a really interesting presentation from Dedi, and we're going to take questions. It's going to be very interactive. Okay, so for more than a century, the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology, has been a pioneer in science and technology education, delivering world-changing impacts benefiting the state of Israel and the world. The Technion has earned a global reputation for its pioneering work in nanotechnology, life sciences, stem cell technology, water management, sustainable energy, information technology, biotechnology, materials engineering, and aerospace. It is also one of only 5 similar institutes worldwide that includes a medical school encouraging rapid progress in biotechnology, drug development, and stem cell technology. Professor Dedi Meiri's world-famous lab is part of the Integrated Cancer Center within the Technion. Dr. Dedi Meiri and his team are at the cutting edge of scientifically understanding the very real healing properties of one of the world's oldest medicinal plants, cannabis. His laboratory of cancer biology and cannabinoid research discovered these 144 strains and have been diligently working to isolate and categorize these 144 individual cannabinoid strains, quite simply so that their healing potential can be further understood. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you for UK Technion to make this possible and for organising the event, and thank you for donating towards the emergency fund established to fight COVID-19. So Dedi, hi, are you there?
Sure. Hi, Leon. Thank you for having me here.
Good to see you. So look, Dedi, I've seen firsthand the work that you do in Haifa at the Technion, and I think it's really interesting what would be really interesting is to try and sort of understand your perspective on the applications of your work and how perhaps we can learn as doctors and clinicians to put that into practice, and the types of things that we need to, the types of challenges that we're all facing at the moment within cannabis medicine. I know I've listened to some of your talks previously, and it's fascinating when you give us when I've heard your insight into some of the projects that you're involved with, not only in Israel but elsewhere across the globe. So can I sort of allow you to speak for a little bit, and then we can. I've always got plenty of questions to ask you, but I also want to include our audience and sort of try and find those really relevant, interesting questions.
Sure. So I prepared kind of presentation, but I think we will skip that.
Yeah.
We'll talk a little bit globally. I think the cannabis is opening a door of a new way how to look on medicines. I'm a big believer in the old way of medicine that, you know, you have a specific disease. As a physician, you need to find the best treatment with the less side effects and harm to the patient. And you have always, you need to examine your patient to understand what is illness, what is the problem, what is the other risks that this patient have, and to choose for him the best treatment. Cannabis shouldn't be a different from that. It should be another tool in the toolbox of a physician to decide if it's the fit to this patient with all his other complex things that the patient have. The thing about cannabis is there is few things that make it more special. We know that cannabis is containing a huge amount of active compounds, and not a single one and specific one. It is containing majorly the cannabinoids, which are a family of molecules that is very unique. There is almost no other plant or creature that we know that producing this molecule, phytocannabinoids from the plant. But if we are moving to humans or animals, all the animals except insects producing these compounds. And in our body, these compounds are very important to preserve homeostasis in our body. And it's part of almost every organs in our body. And for that reason, the cannabis is actually affecting almost all of our organs and all of our cells in our body. If it's in the brain, it will affect the neurons, the microglia, the astrocytes. All of them have receptors for endocannabinoids, and the cannabis is mimicking that. For that reason, it's so wide. Its effect is very, very wide and very complex. In 1998, Professor Rafi Meshulam, published a paper called the entourage effect. And this paper actually spoke about the endocannabinoids, the cannabinoids that our body produces, not the phytocannabinoids. And he showed that two endocannabinoids need to work together in order to get effect. And he tried to explain that this is a complex action. So we're talking about a machinery in our body that is keeping a kind of balance in our body, and it's how we feel appetite, how we feel pain, how we sleep, how we remember, how we heart beating, the immune system, all of them being kind of controlled by this system on a mild way, just bringing things to balance. And the cannabis affecting that. On the other hand, the cannabis is complex plant that contain many compounds. We can analyze today in my lab 144 cannabinoids from the plant. And there are hundreds of types of cannabis. So in my lab only, I have around 900 different types of cannabis. So on this has become too complicated. You as a physician saying, just a moment, Dedi, you just mixed me now with too many details. I have a patient with a disease. Now I need to choose the cannabis. You're telling me there is hundreds of types of cannabis and hundreds of types of things. And now we are getting to how to solve this problem. One way is to go in the kind of classic pharma way, to narrow it down, defining which exactly molecules is participating in which action, to know to purify that, to put it in the pill and to say, okay, you need 5 milligrams per kilogram or whatever of these compounds, like we're giving aspirin, like we're giving Taxol in chemotherapy, like we're giving everything else. On that aspect, I showed last week how in leukemia, we succeed to narrow down 3 molecules that working together in a synergy. We're knowing the amount, we're knowing the mechanism. Now we can go kind of pharma road. This is one side of the cannabis plant. The other side is the more complicated. Because cannabis affecting many organs and many systems in our body, and because it's complicated, sometimes we are getting kind of holistic reaction. And I will give the pain as an example for that. In Israel, from 2007, we have a program that patient can get cannabis under a physician prescription. Israel is kind of half social. So we have the HMOs are private, but under the government control. Every Israeli citizen have insurance. So when I'm going to a GP, or when I'm going to a emergency room, the hospital, I don't need to pay anything. Nobody asks me. If I'm a citizen, I have insurance. It can be deductible from my salary. It doesn't matter how it's worked. Everybody's been insurance, and actually it's kind of public healthcare. So under that, from 2007, every citizen in Israel, if he's eligible to get cannabis, he can get prescription and get cannabis. We have 60,000 patients today in Israel that getting cannabis under prescription of a physician, which is a kind of a huge number. There are pain patients, autistic kids, epileptic kids, cancer patients, and I can go on. There is one major hospital when the patient is coming and getting that cannabis, and there is prescription. You get a prescription for 1 month. Every month you're going and getting the amount that you're getting the prescription for. And in my lab, in the last 4 years, we have a database, and we are following up on this patient. In Israel, we have 8 authorized growers, so it's something that I can control. Every medical cannabis that can get to the patient coming first to my lab, we're doing full analysis, and then we're doing follow-up on the patient. And the results are kind of phenomenal. When you speak with the patient, we are interviewing the patient, all the patient explaining us how it's totally changed their life, how they were miserable, and for years they suffer from pain. And now they're getting cannabis, and they're reducing the other drugs, and they are coming back to normal life. Just to make it more clear, in Israel, in order to get cannabis for pain, you need to have a chronic pain and to be treated a whole year with other medicine under pain physician. And if after this year, the pain physician decides that he didn't succeed to solve it in another way, he can give you cannabis. So these are really patients that suffer a lot, tried many other painkillers, and now transferring to cannabis. And again, the results are phenomenal. when you're going to the main dispensary, the only dispensary, it's one of the hospitals in Israel, and you interview the people, all the people that coming telling you how it's amazing, and you think to yourself, why to give other medicines? It's not even make sense. But when you're doing a real clinical trial, and this is the difference between a registry to real clinical trial. When you're doing a real clinical trial, the results are totally different. So we did, together with Professor Elon Eisenberg, the head of a pain department in Rambam Hospital, one of the hospitals in Israel, we did a big clinical trial of 3,500 patients. When we follow up the patient from the moment they're getting prescription, from that moment, and we follow up on the patient, and we realize that just 50% of them saying that cannabis is helping them, 50% trying a few times and saying, look, it's not doing good for me, I want something else. So first of all, we realize that when we question a patient that are already in the process, all the patients that try and live, you don't see them in the registry that you're doing today in Canada and other places. You see just the one that was success. You don't see the one that withdraw. Second, when we look on the numbers, we saw that the 50% that said that cannabis helped them and keep taking it, saying that it reduced around 25% of the pain. So you know how it works. You give numbers. You said I have a pain level 8. Now it's reduced to 6. It didn't reduce it like morphine or other painkillers. It reduced it in just 25%. In order that a pain drug will pass a clinical trial, it needs to reduce more than 30% in order to pass the placebo part. So actually, if you really measure that, cannabis can't pass the regular regulation of painkillers. He wouldn't pass the clinical trial. But then we're looking and we said in Israel, we have 18,000 pain patients that getting cannabis and telling you how it saved their life. So when you're going to other details, you started to go, and we had very, very wide questionnaire on side effect and other indication. You see that this patient also telling you that it's improved their sleep, it's improved their mood, it's improved their appetite. And then you started to look and you see that actually you're getting something as a treatment that is kind of holistic thing and not just the pain. And I will give you one example on one patient that I know personally, is a friend of my family. This guy, 28 years old, have an accident and have an injury in his back. He suffered from a neuropathic pain, very severe pain, and he stopped working, come back to live with his parents. He lived in his basement. He suffered from pain. He getting painkiller. He started to also to be under depression and go to a psychiatry. So he's not working. He's living in his parents' basement. He's listening to very loud music all day because he said that it's helping not to think about the pain. He's under painkillers, under a psychiatry treatment, not working, really miserable. After a whole treatment, he started to get cannabis. He started to sleep a little bit better, started to stop taking the psychiatry, they stop taking the painkillers, feel better. The pain didn't say that it's improved too much, but all this, he started to work to come back to work. Come back to work, he started to go out with his friend again, met a girl in the pub, moved to live with her, and they got married a month, a little bit before the COVID-19 started. So something like 2 months ago, I were in the wedding. So this is the difference between a guy that was miserable, living in his parents' basement, to a guy that just got married now, working full-time job. If you look just on the pain, the cannabis didn't do much. If you look on the overall quality of life, it's a huge change.
Yeah.
And I'm going to the point that I want to say, 85% of the patient, at least in Israel, getting cannabis, which improving the quality of life. it's not a specific disease that you can put your fingers. These are PTSD patients. These are pain patients. These are cancer patients that getting chemotherapy or radiation and getting cannabis for the quality of life. These are the autistic kids that getting cannabis and it's improving sleep, reducing anxiety, reducing Tourette syndrome and other things that they have. So in overall, I see the cannabis in 5 years today going in two kind of roads. We will have cannabis that are specific molecules or specific extract or specific types of cannabis that treating specific illnesses. If we're talking about reducing seizures in kids, it might be that we'll find CBD in another molecule or another 2 molecules that doing the best effect. And we don't need the whole cannabis. So there will be a specific medicine for specific illnesses, Notch1 mutation in leukemia. These are the 3 molecules that they define. This is a medicine, okay? But I still think that we will have cannabis that treating something more holistic, something more general on quality of life. And this brings us that cannabis is actually one of the first medicines that I'm familiar, that we understand that it's very complicated. We understand that it's containing many compounds, and we understand that it's doing effects that is a wide effect, and we still think we can call it a medicine and give it under prescription. It's something that started to change in the last few years. We know the HIV cocktails. We know cocktails for cancer, different types of chemotherapies together. And I think cannabis is doing another step forward of a complex medicine that we might don't understand all the details inside, but we understand that it's going to do good to our patient, and for that, we own it to our patient to make their life better.
Yeah, absolutely. Dedi, listen, I mean, you know, I've heard, that's fascinating. And I actually, you know, you hear time and time again, this concept that cannabis is actually, particularly as a whole plant, is really more often in line with an improvement in life quality of life. So it's like you say, it's not just sleep or pain levels and so on. I guess you know, there seems to be some common themes that are not just here in the UK, but in other countries where there are clear barriers to prescribing. There's clear problems that we find within the medical establishment accepting cannabis in its current form, in its current state. Okay, and I've thought about this. I could either refer to it in its crude form, or you could also say the whole plant is in its most elegant form. But anyway, it is what it is, and this is what we have to work with. And the problems, if I just focus on the UK, okay, it's multifactorial, but if I just list the main points, number one is education. Okay, that it's come along, and there's a lot of press about it. There's been media hype here. Patients have a concept of it, or they have an opinion, or they want to try it, or they don't. But doctors know nothing. Really, the majority of doctors know nothing about it, and this is really in part because the medical schools haven't taken it perhaps as seriously as they should. So I'd like to sort of get your take on that and what's happening in Israel or in other parts of the world. And we also have this problem with doctors putting their names to a script when these products are in their whole plant form are unlicensed. So there's great concern about what's in them. Are they safe? Do they interact with another medication? They've not been through large clinical trials. And I guess the third point, I don't want to overload you with things to talk about, but is the evidence base. And we have our own, we have NICE here in the UK who really guide doctors in a practical sense with prescribing and you know, giving an outline of what we can and can't prescribe. And actually, there's a huge emphasis on RCTs, gold standard pharmaceutical RCTs, and that's a real sticking point. It's a real deadlock because we don't have that data. And actually, I think the work that you're doing and the hospitals and the specialties that you're working with, you're clearly doing things in a different way. You're building a database, a patient registry, and you're collecting very, very strong data. And you are actually building an evidence base, but unfortunately that doesn't always get perhaps looked at in the same light as RCTs. So anyway, I've given you a lot to discuss, but I just wonder what your how you could help us as doctors, or how we work together, or how we tackle some of these common themes that do tend to come up time and time again.
Yeah. So look, there is cannabis bring within few problems. The point that there is a black market for this drug,
yeah,
make it a kind of a problem for a physician. Okay, in the beginning, when they started to treat with cannabis in Israel, so Silvio Brill, the head of the pain department in Ichilov, told me that from 35 patients a day, he jumped for around 400. Okay.
Okay.
You ask yourself, okay, I have 35 patients a day. Why is jumping for 400? Because he is located in Tel Aviv, the center of the cool young scene in Israel, and instead of paying 100 shekels a gram in the market, you can get it for free. Everybody said, hey, I'm underpaying. So they started to change the rule to be more restrict on that. But as you're doing things more restrict, you will have real patients that will fall between, this restriction, which is always a problem. So first of all, we can't ignore the fact that cannabis is also used as a recreational. And now there is an argument, do we need it as a recreational? We don't need, I don't think this is an argument that a physician needs to do. As a physician, you are treating your patient with the best medicines that you have. What he's doing for his fun, it's his own business, okay? So this is one of the major problems. Second, a lot of the patient, because it's recreation and because it's very safe and because it's out there, are trying it before and coming to the physician after they're trying, okay? So you're speaking with the pain physicians in Israel, like Elon Eisenberg, which, he's kind of half a god in Israel on his field. And Elon is telling me, look, Dedi, one of the problems in the past, if a patient that will come, I will do examination of the patient and I will say, okay, this is his problem. I think this is the best medicine for him. Half of the patient today coming and they don't want to listen to me anymore. Before that, I was half a god. They will come and say, hey, doctor, I'm suffering. What should I do? I will say, hey, first you need to do a diet. You're too fat and it's, it's not good for you. Second, you need to take that. You need to do this and that and that. Said half of the patient today coming and they don't want to listen. Said, hey, I don't care what you're saying. I just need the prescription for cannabis. I want to get cannabis. And said, hey, I'm not a secretary. And I'm not drug dealer. I want to choose for my patient what it is. It's almost the only medicine that I'm familiar with that the patient coming and saying sentences like, the patient know better than the physician, We know on ourselves, we know our body better than anybody else. Every sentence like that. I don't know any patient that's coming to emergency room and tell the physician, hey, move aside, I know on my body better, right? This is just when we're talking about cannabis, everybody know better. So this is one problem. Second problem, and Elon Eisenberg is saying it very nicely, said, now this is half of the patient. The other half, I'm trying to treat them with this and that, and then I decide to start to treat them with cannabis. And I'm convincing the patient that I think cannabis is a good choice for them, okay? And I'm prescribing cannabis. And in Israel, you prescribe cannabis. You don't prescribe which type of cannabis. You prescribe the amount, the dose, and then cannabis. So you prescribe cannabis, 30 grams, okay? So he said, next month, the patient is coming again. I said, hey, doctor, this is amazing. It really helped me. I'm feeling great. but look, I'm taking in the morning Scooby-Doo, in the evening Mickey Mouse. What do you think? Do you think I will change? And said, in that moment, I become a friend of the bar and not a physician. I don't know what is Scooby-Doo and White Widow and Infinity and all of these names. This is for me, I don't know what is taking in the morning, what is taking in the evening, and I can't do the practice that usually I can do. In order to cross this gap, physicians need to learn a lot. Look, when I'm coming to the dispensary, to a Barbanel dispensary, it takes around 2 minutes that I have a gathering of 30 patients around me, okay? And I'm speaking with the patient, and everyone that opened his mouth and said, hey, this is doing like that, it takes me 2 minutes to make everybody very, very, very small. And I don't want to be, not polite, but I can tell every patient about his disease, what is the endocannabinoid system related, why this cannabis is doing that. I know the names of all the cannabis in Israel. I know which one have which concentration. I have the knowledge that now the patient is looking at me and said, hey, Daddy, what should I take? How to do that? What is the best for me? Okay? You must gain this trust from the patient as a physician, that the patient will believe you and will stand and say, hey, doctor, what to do? And one of the major problems today that we don't have that. Usually, a lot of the time, the patient that already treat himself few years with cannabis and is knowing much more than the physician. And this is a gap that will take time to cross it. And until we cross it, we are in kind of a problem between the relationship between a patient and a physician. And I'm a big supporter that the physician must be the one that have the knowledge and tell what to do.
Exactly.
The patient don't understand the complexity.
And I think where we are at the moment with it often is this idea of, I mean, we get, the training in cannabis prescribing is often, oh, you go low, start slow, titrate. It's very non-specific, and actually a lot of doctors don't work in that way, or they certainly don't these days. Perhaps in the past they did. They were slightly more creative with how they treated patients. But it seems quite non-specific. And also I've heard lots of anecdotal reports of, say, someone, actually I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, but for example, people with epilepsy who all of a sudden the same strain or the same plant, it's no longer giving the same effect. So, I mean, what's your take on that, Dedi?
Yes, so we have these issues in Israel few times. There was a big crisis with the autistic kids that I'm showing this data many times because it's classic. In Israel, we started to treat autistic kids 3.5 years ago, when there was few autistic kids that have also a lot of seizures and got cannabis to reduce the seizures. But actually the families came back and said, hey, for the seizures, it worked fine, but please don't stop to give us the cannabis because it's really changed our lives with our kids. The kids are sleeping better, the kids are eating better, the kids have less anxiety, they have less bursts of violence and all of this. And in Israel, there was the Minister of Health decided to start to treat more and more autistic kids. And the beginning was very, very severe autistic kids, very violent, that none of the other drugs help them, that have a sleep problem. There was a category which kids to give them. And we follow up on that, and we did kind of a trial after that. And there was a huge improvement from 8.2 times of waking up every night per child. It's reduced to 1.2. It's improved dramatically the violence of these kids. I think the number was 87% improvement. Behavior, it's improved the anxiety, it's improved many parameters. And for a year, the success was so big that more and more kids started to get this specific cannabis, specific oil that they got. And because this company have, they didn't plan that so many kids will get a prescription for that. And cannabis is kind of 3-4 months round of growing. After a few months, they ran out of their stock. So they said, okay, this is high CBD, low THC strain, 20 to 1 THC to CBD. We will give a different strain with the same amount of CBD and THC. And they started to give that. And even though they was transparent about it, said, hey, look, it's a different strain, but it's exactly the same. It's the same amount of THC, CBD. It's the same amount of cannabinoid, the same one that they can see. After a few days, we have a totally crash. More than 40 kids that become violence again. Like every parameter was going down. And when we started to look inside the cannabinoids, we realized that what we call the minor cannabinoids are different. This is one example how different strains that even if they look for us the same product, they are very different. On the same aspect, we have cases that the same genetic of a plant can be changed if you change the grow facility, if you change parameters, if there can be a mutation in this genetic. And then one plant or one extract or one product that worked for years for a specific indication stop working at once. And we have this case, we have few cases like that in the past. My belief that we won't be able to run out of being more accurate. Even though we will stay in the whole plant extract, we will need to understand which parameters are important and to know to measure them and to know to bring the patient the same medicine always. Even this is an extract, a whole plant, it should be grown, manufactured, packaged in the same way that we will keep the same thing always for the same patient, for the same patient. So you as a physician, if you learn that this is a good product and it's work for your patient and you say to them, hey, take a 2 ml every day or take 5 milligrams of whole extract per day, you will know the side effects of that, how the patient react, which type of patient react, what are the difference between male and females on these plants. And the product, I think, should be consistent, even though if it's a whole plant.
And how far off are we in sort of getting to that point, Dedi, to have real consistency across whole plant products? Or
so technically we're not far. I have the ability to do that. So I can look on a product and tell you what are the differences between what was 3 months ago.
Okay.
Growers going more and more of growing under consistent way and to bring as much consistent products as they can. And they are getting much better. If 4 years ago, when I started to follow up on the growers, it was a Wild West. Today, I will say the 90% of the times you will get the same product in very consistent.
Because I think these are all things that give doctors confidence in prescribing, and particularly if these products, which the majority of them will, I suspect, remain off license.
But Leon, I will say this is a market and a business like every business. If it will be a demand of the physician, if it will be a demand of the patient, then the producers must follow up. Yeah. And you will have products like every product, you will have low costs and then forever, and you will have high cost of things that are better, like every product.
And tell me your thoughts on synthetic cannabinoids, Dedi. What do you think the future holds for, with synthetics?
So I think that a molecule is a molecule, it's a molecule, okay? It doesn't matter when it came from. CBD, if it's really CBD, it doesn't matter. If you know the structure, you know what is it. It doesn't matter if I'm purifying it now from the plant, if I make it synthetic, if I'm making it from a yeast, okay? But do we really know how the cannabinoids look like or how they act? This is the question. Are all the high CBD plants out there have the same CBD exactly? Or, you know, there are isomers that in the way that people look on them till today, they think it's CBD. You run it in HPLC, you see where it's coming out, you say, oh, this is cannabis, this is in the peak on the HPLC, this will be CBD. In order to really verify that, you need to do very accurate science. You need to purify it from the plant almost 100%. You need to go to the NMR. You need to be very, you know, it's a high level, very expensive stuff to do. And people are not doing that.
Why is, let's say, Big Pharma not doing this? Is there a reason for that, or?
First of all, you will know what Big Pharma is doing today in 5 years. Okay. You know, like you don't know what they are doing in their basement, in their dark basement. You will see when the medicine will be out. I would be surprised if part of them not doing that already. Okay, but again, I think they will start to do that when the first medicine will start to get out and the promise will be more big. And I can tell you that the biggest pharma companies are speaking with me and they are sitting on my neck in the last year, okay? But again, I'm coming back to the question. Do all CBD in the plants are the same? If they are the same, so synthetic CBD will be the same like CBD. But I had in epilepsy, I know that if I'm taking pure CBD, synthetic CBD, it's reducing 80% of the seizures in the mice model that I have. I have genetics model and inducible, doesn't matter. And then I'm taking 10 different strains in Israel with high CBD. And I'm bringing all to the same amount of CBD in all of them, 5 milligrams per kilogram mice. And I'm giving them, and I see big changes. So in the beginning, I said, okay, this is because there are other molecules that are affecting. But then you see that one strain is make actually the situation of the mouse worse, is not helping as the regular CBD that I know. So I would assume that it will at least bring to 80%, and the 20% added effect, it's another phytocannabinoids or flavonoids or something else. And I'm looking for what is the additive effect of that, okay? But why, if I have a strain that have this amount of 5 milligrams per kilogram CBD, it's not working as good as CBD? And we started to isolate the CBD and to check it. And we realized that it's not really CBD. It's the same CBD, but with an isomer. If you will run it in the NMR, if you run it, in the HPLC, in the LCMS, you won't understand it. Until we didn't reach to the NMR, we didn't understand.
Is it like a chiral, a left and right-handed variant?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
And that's like there's drugs in the past, aren't there, where I think thalidomide, when they were isomers, they act in a totally different way.
Right.
Yeah.
So you know, this is a big thing for me as a scientist, but it's just telling you that we don't know enough for now. This is the dangerous about the synthetic. If you will know enough, you know which chiral you need, and you know how it's binding the receptors, and you know everything, and which receptors you need. You know, people talking about the receptors of the endocannabinoid system, usually people mentioning CB1, CB2, sometimes the knowledgeable mentioning GPR55. My lab today working with 37 endocannabinoid receptors, GPR3, GPR119, GPR, like we have at least 37. So which cannabinoid, in which terminology of this cannabinoid, which structure, binding which receptors, how it's activating, we are far from understanding that. And for that reason, to do synthetic, it's still a little bit far from.
Okay. Listen, I'm aware of time, Dedi, so we're going to take some questions. I've got a few quick fire questions for you. Tell me about very briefly, the education in Israel, in the medical schools.
First of
Doctors
all,
learning about them?
First of all, more and more medical schools are starting to teach endocannabinoids
Okay.
course.
Yeah.
I'm building now a course for my faculty, but almost all the faculty is starting that. More that there are many courses that the Ministry of Health is doing. So we have course for physicians, we have a course for pharmacists, we have a course for nurses.
Yeah.
It's running. The course for physician is already, I think, the 13 round. We have 3 a year. I'm teaching 3 lessons in that one, so I'm familiar with all of them. But also there are courses in general cannabis and like that. I would say there is at least 9 different types of courses that you can get a kind of a certificate that you did the course, and this certificate is from the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Agriculture. This is the major education in Israel. There was few online courses that have been done. One of them by Elon Eisenberg, which is very good one on MOOC and Coursera. I think on universities is starting to put it in. It's starting first in the colleges in Israel and then move to the universities. I think that if you're asking me, they don't doing it because they understand the importance of that, they're doing it because there is a demand of the students and it brings students.
Listen, I mean, we had a report recently. It was the Conservative Drug Policy Report. It was written for government and it gave the state of cannabis access in the UK. And the teaching is really very minimal in UK medical schools. So this is a problem that we're trying to address here through some of the groups I'm involved with.
We have huge advantage in Israel, and it's called Rafi Meshulam.
Yeah, of course.
Rafi is one of the pioneer, if not the pioneer in this field, but he always was very important professor in the university. He always was he was the dean he was the president of the Hebrew University, and for that reason he was always important, and he pushed that. So Rafi is very strong. He won in 2000 the Israeli Prize for Science. He's very, very important.
He needs to get his Nobel Prize and retire, basically. That's really his,
I totally agree. He was 90 last month. So.
I know, and he's still working. It's amazing. He was at a conference in London. He was there. It was phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
And what was the last thing I was going to say? Look, I think what I find very interesting about where you're placed, Dedi, is that we have the problem here that we're told we don't have the evidence base, we don't have the data and so on. But actually, you're demonstrating in Israel that people like patients are getting cannabis, but there's something behind it. You're analyzing the strains, you understand the chemovars, you're collecting data, you're looking at more than one outcome. You're looking at not just pain scores, but quality of life scores, and actually, there's a huge say power in that information and that evidence. And I think we've probably all got a lot to learn in the way that the information is being collected and that people are able to access cannabis, but you're also learning through the process. So look, I tell you what, I want to give the audience a chance to answer some questions. So let me just have a look, because actually there's quite a few things coming through here. So okay, this is interesting. This is from Anonymous. So what do we know about interactions with opiates?
There's few publications in the past that showing, so first of all, cannabinoids can activate the opioid receptors. So we know that cannabinoids can, part of the way they are reducing pain can be through the opioid receptors. There was few publication and there was few works regarding that. I think Paul Fachter from the NIH and other very important scientists did a work on that, and they showed that there can't be or might be a synergism between cannabinoids and opioids So if you are taking cannabis with opioids, you can reduce the amount of the opioids 10 times and even more. You can go to what we call the, minimum doses. And I don't think that it's been done in clinical trials. I know there are few clinical trials that are about to start on that aspect, but it's more till now more preclinical, so mice models and then theories than the actual action. I can tell two things from the patient in Israel. Usually a patient, what is usually? This is a trial that we did, so I know exactly the numbers, right? 85% of the patients that's starting to get cannabis withdrawing the opioid in 1 month. So it's probably also helping on the withdrawal, like the addictions and stuff like that. But this is just, I can say it as a coincidence of what I see and not really trial or can prove that.
Because it's often something that's thrown about, isn't it? That it's discussed. It's you often hear about the cannabis versus opioids. This one's safer than this one, I guess it needs to be backed up by strong data. But I've heard many anecdotal reports of patients who are able to come off their opioids within a few weeks, often, or a few months.
I want to say something that it's very important.
Go on.
And I said that before. I think cannabis, it's another tool in the physician toolbox. It's not replacing other medicine or no. It's another tool.
No,
and the endocannabinoid system, as I started, it's a system that bringing things to balance, and it's very moderate. If I'm touching a hot glass and my hand is moving, the endocannabinoids will operate and reduce this pain. But this is, very moderate pain. When you will have a severe injury, your body will produce opioids. And there is a reason for that. The opioids are much more strong on reducing pain. If you are injured in the battle, probably they won't give you a joint to smoke, they will give you morphine, okay? And it's the same, I will say, on the immune system. You're giving steroid, you're shutting down the immune system. But if you just want to balance the immune system, maybe cannabinoids can be perfect. And we need to learn where to use it and when is right to use it.
But I think there is a role for it, certainly for it to be considered for chronic pain, because we have a problem here, and we see this throughout most of the world, that there are too many patients long-term on opiates and other types of medicines. So that's where I think it really comes into its own.
I must say that in Israel, we have less these problems.
Okay.
Usually the physician won't give opioids more than 1, 2, 3 months, and if we will give, he will do changes. We don't have this problem that having in the state. I know that because I'm living that in this field in the last 5 years, but in Israel it's less severe.
That's good. Okay, let's go to some more questions. With the multitude of benefits of the cannabis plant, should we be using it to prevent the development of any diseases? Microdosing. Is that something you've come across?
Yeah, so I don't know on any disease that can be prevented by taking cannabis. We can discuss. We need to discuss every illnesses. The only things that I'm familiar. Also, we are now submitting a paper on that. But the only thing that I know that cannabis can prevent is migraines, cluster headaches. Okay. So we know that patients that taking even low amount of cannabis, and depend which one, but can take cannabis, will reduce the amount of migraine that they are getting up to elevate it totally, reduce it totally. Yeah. And this is kind of prevention. You're taking cannabis and you don't get the attack. It's kind of prevention. So you don't need to. if you have the migraine now attacking you, it's a little bit too late to take the cannabis. But if you're taking cannabis on a regular basis, it can reduce migraine. It's actually the only one that I know as a prevention.
Yeah, I think it'd be good. Dedi, give me your thoughts on, look, as a GP, I sometimes meet patients who talk about cannabis for cancer, and I think it's, if there's any, I mean, I know we've got a lot of doctors tuned in today, but we've also got, you know, members of the general public and other people from across the world. And I think it's really important to talk about the fact that I know there are studies like you've done yourself where you see cancer cells that have been directly affected by cannabis. But I think it's really important that, you know, as academics and doctors, we don't advocate it purely for cancers. And it's more, I mean, my view on it is it's more a holistic medicine to help with the side effects of chemo or pain or sleep and things like that.
I think as a palliative care, supporting treatment, I think there is no doubt that cannabis can be helpful. Whether cannabis can fight cancer, this is too far from now to know. And more than that, cancer is a given name to hundreds of different diseases. Cannabis is a given name to hundreds of different species.
Yeah.
Which type of cannabis can help on which types of cancer? It's such a lottery that it's your possibility to find the right cannabis to the right cancer today is almost impossible. So, and I follow up, there is what we call Rick Simpson oil. Yes. I follow up in Israel on 150 patients that took Rick Simpson oil. Unfortunately, none of them I saw a really improvement. So two things I will say. If I would think that cannabis is not or won't be a possibility to treat some types of cancer, I wouldn't gamble my career on that. You know, half of my lab, that's what we're doing from the morning to the evening. Do I think a patient today that have cancer should take cannabis as a treatment for cancer without understanding the mechanism, which types of cannabis for which types of cancer? Absolutely not. The percentage of success today in Rick Simpson oil or cannabis to cancer, it's around 0.5, which is even less than placebo. So I think, you know, the possibility to have really improvement is still not there. Do I think that in 5 years we will have specific cancer that will be treatable by types of cannabis? I think so. But today, it's irresponsible for the patient or physician to give cannabis for cancer.
Well, that was hopefully, Sean, that's answered your question. Mo Amin, do you know of any research into the effects of cannabis on treating addiction?
Yes, I know few studies on cannabis and treating addiction. I know one in the state that Columbia Care Company is doing, and I know one in Canada. I don't know. I think these studies they still running. So yeah. I don't have the answers, but there are few studies about that.
Okay. Let's have a look. We've got a lot of questions coming through. Okay. In which more medical treatment fields do you think medical cannabis will make changes soon? I'll tell you what. Let's rephrase that. Which areas of medicine do you think offer the most promise with cannabis, Dedi? What excites you the most?
On top of what is known and already treated, I guess, right?
Yeah. Derm or, you know, psych, like what mood disorder. What do you think offers the most sort of promise with cannabis therapies?
So again, you know, I think the most promise is the known thing, is like pain and sleep and epilepsy and anxiety and this kind of thing. But I think one of the things that is still not being treated with cannabis, and it's still a black box, but I really, really believe in it. And in my lab, I have phenomenal results. It's dementia and Alzheimer.
Okay.
So I think cannabis is activating microglia, changing things in the neurons. And I think it will first of all, improve the quality of life of Alzheimer patient, and that, but I think it can also help dementia, and it will be, again, it's like cancer, right? There is different types of diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, and many types of cannabis, and we need to learn to fit it. But I believe that this will be another field, big field. And I'm saying that after 3 years of study in my life, in my lab, I have a few neurodegenerative diseases that we're working on then, and Alzheimer is a major. We have a mice model for Alzheimer and other model for Alzheimer, and the results are very, very promising. So I think this will be a big thing.
So, I mean, I've heard more about how it improves agitation, sleep, and things like that, but I've not really considered it as actually something that can prevent dementia or help to in the.
So preventing dementia, it's always a big question how you check that in humans, because you're starting with somebody that's starting to have dementia and you're treating him, and then first of all, it's many years of until you really have answers. Second, you never know if you really improve or not improve, because you never know what is the end point that this guy will reach in which years, you know. It reminds me the beginning of the COVID-19 in Israel, when the Minister of Health stand and said, in 1 month we will have 5,500 people that need you know, ventilizing, right? And I listened to him and I said, okay, you know, if we will have just 90, he said, hey, you see, I have a very big success. And if there will be 2,000, said, hey, I cut half, right? So we're exactly after 1 month when he said that, and we have 93 people in Israel that are under ventilation. So now the question, did really the healthcare in Israel did the right things and prevent that, or these are just the numbers? So, and we will never have the real answer. So this is my problem to say that, again, in animal model, which is easier to measure, and I understand the mechanism why it's doing that, we have very promising results, and I think it will be a thing.
Okay.
One of the causes for dementia is the endocannabinoid. It's reducing the endocannabinoids activity. So it makes sense that cannabis will compensate on that.
So you mentioned COVID-19. I know in your first talk, Dedi, you spoke about the cytokine storm and the potential role for cannabis, or at least it's something to explore, isn't it? And I know that your team are looking into that.
Yes.
Sandra Carrillo from Colombia. Dedi, are you aware of any studies in Israel utilizing cannabis to treat COVID-19? Well, that's the part of your current work, is that right?
Sure. So first of all, yes, we are working on 2 aspects. One of them is reducing a specific cytokine, IL-6, IL-7, IL-17, to reduce the cytokine storm, the reaction, and this is kind of known thing. It's from other studies that we're doing and knowing. So we just took, instead of doing on other cells, we move it to lung cells and T cells. The other thing, there is a receptors, which is extremely important for the infection, the virus infection, ACE2, which we find few strains of cannabis that reducing the expression of these receptors. And we think that it's might reducing the infection. And this is 2 things that we are doing. There are few groups in Israel that's working on that, on cannabis aspect. On other aspect, there is just in the Technion 30 labs. But on cannabis aspect, there are few groups that working on that. We kind of collaborating and working together. So every one of them trying to do something else, and there are, yeah.
Okay, Dedi, we'll take a couple more questions, and then we can perhaps get back to some of these separately. So this comes in from James. Whilst we're waiting for cannabis to be used more widely and prescribed by GPs, is it worth using the generic products that can be bought over the counter, CBD oil, so hemp supplements, hemp CBD? There's a huge craze in the UK. I'm not sure if it's the same in Israel.
So hemp CBD or these products are very specific products. They are not replacing 95% of the other cannabis products. It's very specific type of illnesses or that can be treated by that. It's very narrow part of that. Leon, you are stuck. I can't hear you. Your video is stuck, I guess. Or you can't hear me, something like that. So since Leon is frozen, I will keep answering a question until he will come back, and I don't know how long we have. So
Okay.
one of the question was, hey Leon, you were freeze.
Yeah, sorry.
Look,
yeah, the question is hemp-derived CBD products, which are flooding the UK at the moment, and people are using these for all kinds to try and treat all kinds of things. Do they work particularly well? And what's your view on? I mean, they're generally quite low in CBD. And
so Leon, I already answered that. You just didn't hear that, so I will repeat it shortly. Hemp CBD is replacing or can be used just for things that CBD is treated, and CBD treated very narrow type of things like epilepsy, but not all of them. Reducing anxiety, improving sleep, pain, and other things being treated by other molecules and not just CBD. And for that reason, this won't replace everything. Like there was a hype mainly in the state because the CBD was legal and the THC not, pushing CBD in everything and say CBD is replacing everything. It's far from being true. It's another molecule in the plant that high express, very important one, very potent one, but not replacing everything.
Okay. All right, listen, is there a difference between the endocannabinoid system between males and females?
Yes, yes,
yeah.
yes. So females are a circadian creature, and we are more straight, you know, or more fixed. And for that reason, we have a different a road of endocannabinoid system between male and female. There are differences. There are many papers and many work about these differences, but there are very strong differences. One of the things that we saw from our database, which is kind of amazing, it's not enough data to be published, but it's one of the major things that I was surprised. Female and male in Israel taking different strains of cannabis. So they're starting with the same strains. It's not what the grower give them. Starting with the same strains, but if you see the finish, there are strains that just female use, just female. And there are strains that just male. So you have 500 female using this strain, 0 male, or just 2,000 male, 0 and 0 female, like none of the female using this strain. And one of the reasons of that, it's the endocannabinoid system. These strains affecting different the endocannabinoid system. So it's kind of quite clear and known the endocannabinoid system is operate or circulate different in male and female.
Very interesting. Eddie, sorry, I'm trying to look. I've got so many questions coming through. I'm trying to find the ones that perhaps will appeal to the most audience members. Okay, let's maybe take one more. Okay, has there been any research or studies in Israel or elsewhere on the use of cannabis to help people lose weight? I know it's normally an appetite stimulant, isn't it? THC and for chemo patients. And
yes, so cannabis stimulates appetite. We have from our database, we see that there are few strains that the patient is saying that it's reduced appetite. okay? But there is something else. We call it the appetite paradox. If you look on really stoners, you know, my friends from high school and from, not high school in Israel because we are going to the army, but from university, which are stoners that for 20 years, usually they are very thin, they are not fat. Mm. And if you ask me, it's kind of because you're doing saturation of the receptors. The endocannabinoid receptors, they are responsible for our hedonic eating, for our induced appetite, even when we're not hungry. You know, we're eating a meal, we're totally full, and then come the dessert, right? And we see the dessert and we want to eat. And when I'm working and writing a paper, every half an hour, I'm going to the fridge to snack something, okay? Cannabis users, the chronic one, are desynthesize these receptors. They are using so much that you upper the threshold. So when they are smoking and whatever, you're getting munches, you get increased appetite. But between that and that, they are less sensitive to increase their appetite. So what's happened, when they are not smoking, during the day, they are much less being triggered by smell, by look, and by things that normal person will be triggered on this endocannabinoid system. So this is one of the kind that creating this paradox that usually the real one that using a lot of cannabis is losing weight and not gaining weight. If we're talking about medical cannabis, that you're not talking about chronic use for years or whatever, and not this kind of amount, this I don't know. I do know that there are strains that are patients saying that it's reduced appetite. We never dive into that enough, and there was no trials on them.
Eddie, that was absolutely fascinating. Well, it's been a real honor, a real pleasure to talk to you. It's always very interesting to hear your views on everything. I think ultimately, you know, we're all trying to achieve the same outcome, that patients in need are able to access safe products, reliable products. Doctors feel comfortable and happy prescribing these types of medications. So thank you again for all your work. Listen, there's a lot of questions. We'll try and get back to some of them if we can. If this is something that's of great interest to people, we can even talk about putting on maybe part 3. Who knows? You know, we can discuss that. So thank you again. And also I'd like to say thank you to Technion UK who have helped to put this on, and also to everyone that's donated towards this webinar. I know it's raised some money to go towards the COVID-19 project currently underway. So
thank you very much, Leon. Thank you very much, Sophie and the guys of the UK Technion for having me again. Yeah. Thank you very much for all the participants that survived this long talk, and I hope they enjoy that. I enjoyed it for sure.
Yeah, it's great.
Have a great weekend.
All right, take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.